Welcome back to the weekly Trusted Visions podcast. Hope that everybody's having a good week. I do got to start this podcast with saying, as I posted on our social media and Trusted Visions page, that I was able to take a step back and take a vacation with the family. And my 5-year-old had reminded me, because she picked out this cup, that I had to use this coffee cup for what she calls my video cast. So it's not the Trusted Visions cup, but she's very proud of it. So with that being said, we wanted to start this month off and talk about a topic that we have some expertise and do things a lot differently and have resources and tools to where we work with a lot of super OSJs or large enterprises and make that transition much more seamless. And so I wanted to cover this week talking about the trends we're seeing of these super OSJs in large enterprises and why, and some of the advantages of a single advisor or a father-son team or mother-daughter team joining a super OSJ versus going direct to a broker-dealer. Now, going direct to the broker-dealer is not a bad thing by any means, but there's also some advantages. So Shaun, David, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here. David, let's start with you. And before we dive too deep into it, maybe give the audience an idea of what is Trusted Visions talking about large enterprise and super OSJ, and then go into the trends that we're seeing that more of these small ensembles and even single advisors, why they're tending to flock more towards being part of those large enterprises or super OSJs.
Absolutely. Well, the super OSJs have always been around, and they've always been very popular in a lot of cases because they're very kind of on their own island. But super OSJs have really taken on a different capacity in our world. You know, when you look at the huge consolidation of broker dealers, there's far less of them to choose from. You know, we have those conversations all the time with advisors saying, hey, this is what I want. This is where I came from. I want, you know, kind of small family-friendly firm that people know my name and we can have conversations with and I can build relationships with. But that's great. There are not as many of them out there now. But the other biggest thing is I would like that, but I also want all the technology. I want to be able to utilize all the nuances that are going on in our world today. And if I'm not utilizing the best technology or have the best systems and the best things, then it's going to hinder my practice. So I want both. Show me how I can get both. And that's really where the thinking and the landscape has changed a ton. When you're looking at how do you find that partnership? How do you find that broker dealer? Because that's pretty easy. If you want to find a broker dealer, you can do a Google search. You find all the broker dealers are regional to you, the national broker dealers, you have it. Talk to any third-party recruiter. They'll have a list of broker dealers they can give you. But when you look at where the super OSJs come into play, those are acting more and more like your mom and pop kind of shops. It gives you the availability to have that one-on-one attention, have some nuances, because a lot of the super OSJs, which, you know, can be large, you know, you can be talking anywhere from 50 advisors to 150 advisors, 200 plus in some cases. And that's the size of some of the old broker dealers that we used to do business with back in the day. But really what it comes down to is it's really that mindset. You're finding somebody that you have that partnership with. And a lot of cases, they handle your client complaints. They take care of your operational issues. They take care of everything that you need. So the broker dealer in the background plays less of an issue. But the huge factor is they've got the technology, they got the infrastructure, they got the compliance network, they got everything that's going to basically allow you to function effectively in this technologically aged area that we're in, especially being an advisor on that side of it. You've got all that protection, you've got the technology, but now you've got that partnership. And that's where those super OSJs have become very, very popular for the simple fact it's kind of like having that mom and pop kind of broker dealer relationship that everybody wants, but you also get the availability to leverage the technology, the resources, the infrastructure that goes along with it. So that's really where the big benefits come into play. And finding those, I know Shaun could probably talk a little bit about that too, and Jeremy, you can delve into that a little bit too, is finding them is the hard part. Finding the broker dealer is the easy part. Finding those super OSJs or finding people that have that same mindset, it can take some time, and not everything fits. So there's always a lot of opportunity out there, but there's unique opportunity when you're looking at those super OSJs. don't kind of look past the broker dealer side of it and look at what are you getting as far as benefits and features and technology and that support and personal relationships that you're looking for, that you feel that you have to have for your practice to be successful moving forward.
Right. Perfect. And I couldn't agree more, David. And I think you teed it up perfectly for Shaun, because as you mentioned, you can reach out to broker dealers and you can Google independent broker dealers and you'll get a whole laundry list. You can even go on to some of the publications and see the broker dealers. But I don't know that you can Google Super OSJ and something's going to come up. So, Shaun, I know you have a great deal of experience of working with some of these larger enterprises and Super OSJs throughout your career. How does an advisor that's even considering that find a Super OSJ? I mean, do they call the broker dealer and say, "Hey, I want to be part of a Super OSJ," or how does that work for our audience? I think it would be valuable for them to hear from you, given your experience.
Well, sure. Well, first and foremost, you definitely want to contact Trusted Visions to know what OSJs, enterprises, or subgroups are available. To your point, Jeremy, many of these teams do not necessarily advertise or market for recruiting purposes because they leverage their broker-dealer's business development department. And OSJ's responsibility, which we're not going to go down the laundry list of those here on this call, but it does, take a lot of their time. So there's one of those situations where there may not just be enough time in the day to market to prospective advisors, with the responsibilities they have. And it may not be the most cost-effective thing for an OSJ to take upon, which is why you leverage, a firm like Trusted Visions. Here at Trusted Visions, we have several, of who we believe are some of the most competitive OSJs in the industry. From great pricing, great culture, amazing support and service. However, to Dave's point, not all OSJs are fit for every advisor. So in terms of finding, the OSJ, I definitely believe you should leverage Trusted Visions. However, it's a little deeper. So I wanted to just, take a deeper dive on your question. Because once you identify that OSJ, you have to find, figure out if they're the right fit or not. And so I wanted to just touch on quickly some things to consider when finding the right OSJ if you're a prospective advisor. Number one is the personality. In my opinion, personality is number one on my list. There has to be a connection on some level with the OSJ. Throughout my years of recruiting, I have come across advisors who have left an OSJ group, not because of pricing, not because of payout, not even because of support and service, but it was simply because there wasn't a connection with the OSJ. For lack of a better term, I'm going to share with you exactly what a prospective advisor mentioned to me years ago when he left his OSJ. He simply put, "My OSJ is a jerk." So you want to make sure that you alleviate that or eliminate that on the onset by having conversations and just truly understanding if there's a personality fit, which trickles down to my next point and something Dave alluded to, which is the culture. As an advisor, you want to understand the culture of the enterprise because there is a culture within a culture. Yes, you have the culture of the broker-dealer. However, the enterprise culture is much different than the broker-dealer level. You can ask several questions, such as how many advisors are within the enterprise? What type of business mix does each advisor have? In lieu of the broker-dealer, this has been a big one from, working with large OSJs and enterprises throughout my years. Are there any regional meetings, for an advisor within the enterprise? What type of networking opportunities are there to, build relationships with advisors within the enterprise? So you want to get a feel for the culture. So personality, culture are two that I feel I'll put ahead of everything else. And obviously payout pricing, that speaks for itself. We feel, and Dave, Jeremy, you guys can agree that we have some of the best enterprises here with the top payouts that you're going to find in the country. However, there are some OSJs who don't believe in maxing out the payout because there are some services they offer There could be some office space they offer, which makes the payout a little less than what's expected. So you just want to ask those questions. Then also a big one for me is transition support. What type of transition support does the enterprise offer or OSJ offer in lieu of the broker dealer? Is this a situation where the OSJ is hands off, or is it a situation where the OSJ is hands on? That's very important, because I believe that an OSJ should certainly, if they're not administering the transition, they should definitely have an interest in the transition to understand, the book of business that you're bringing over and ways that they can assist you once you're here. So, not to be direct to the point as far as how to find an OSJ, I Trusted Visions is definitely a resource for that, but also taking a deeper dive into things to look for, when you're navigating the OSJ waters, because once you transition your book over, as we mentioned on so many of these calls, it's definitely a lot tougher to get out than it is to get in. So.
Yeah, and Shaun, I mean, those are good points. And as we've talked about on previous podcasts, yes, our audience can go direct to a broker dealer and negotiate on their behalf and see if they're a good fit. It's very similar, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it's very similar why working with a firm like Trusted Visions, when you're looking at a Super OSJ, because some Super OSJs are going to be hybrid and have RIA only options and like you said, offer higher payouts. Some Super OSJs are going to be more in line with, hey, we're going to provide a high level of service and touch and have regular and routine meetings. And lastly, and probably just as important, if not most important, working with a firm like Trusted Visions, we know to make sure to ask the questions you don't know to ask. For example, getting a release letter ahead of time. I know we've all seen it in our career where most broker dealers require the OSJ to release the advisor if they want to go to another OSJ within the broker dealer. And quite honestly, I've seen some of those OSJs hold those advisors hostage. Right. And so working with a firm like Trusted Visions to protect you, your practice, and your clients is vital, just as it is working with us versus going direct to the broker dealer. Right. Now, I know you guys always love when I throw curveballs in there, and I know this isn't something we discussed or a topic we were going to consider, but I think it's relevant with everything that's going on in the industry and the consolidation. What advice, starting with you, David, would you give to some of those Super OSJs or large enterprises that are with a broker dealer that it's forecasted there's going to be drastic changes, or there's already been drastic changes, or there's been changes in leadership? And many of those OSJs, for a lack of better term, put their head in the sand and think it's all going to go away. What advice, and I'd like to hear both of you, what brief advice would you give to those large enterprises or OSJs that are facing that scenario?
I think on that side, you hit the nail on the head. Don't put your head in the sand. Don't just hope the dust is going to settle and the waves are going to subside. You really got to take a look at it. And what I tell a lot of the Super OSJs when there's changes, a lot of changes, especially on the broker dealer level, and there's just a lot of changes that's creating maybe some uncertainty on that side, is communication. Communication is key. Communicating with all of your advisors that are underneath your Super OSJ. Pretend it's it's just like anything else. Anytime there's a huge change in the industry, there's a lot of communication that goes along with any regulation changes, things like that. Communication is key. And it's the same thing on this. Make sure that you understand that your advisors understand their concerns. Have that open dialogue where, if you're with a larger, broker dealer in a lot of cases, and a lot of them feel like their voice is never heard, especially at the broker dealer level, and really nobody has any changes. You can't input any kind of changes on that side of it, but it's just communication. Talk with your advisors, get their concerns, where they think things are going to go, because if not, you could lose a number of advisors since you don't communicate it with them. There's going to be, the sad part, there's going to be recruiters and other people out there that communicate with them and talk to them about the uncertainties, and they're going to build that plan B. And you as an OSJ, having that plan B is going to be extremely important. Right.
And Shaun, further advice on that side of it?
Well, I echo Dave's thoughts. I think he did a great job. And just to add on to what he mentioned, the communication aspect of it is huge. It's very important. And an OSJ, certainly can understand you don't have to, what I call pull the proverbial fire alarm. It could be a situation where you just pick up the phone and just have a conversation with the advisors in your group. It could be one-on-one. It could be very informal. Hey, just pick up the call and say, hey, listen, I know there's been some changes, at the broker dealer. How do you feel about it? It can be something that simple, but it's almost like a vote, because if you speak to enough of them and they tell you that they're not happy, then maybe you as an OSJ want to take, leadership and establish a plan B for the group and notify the group that, hey, you're establishing a plan B. So they can take comfort in knowing that you're, as you've always been as an OSJ, you're still protecting their best interest even throughout changes at the existing firm.
Yeah, and I think to that point, and I just talked to a $1.6 billion Super OSJ the other day, and his comment to me was, I really don't want to formulate a plan B because they're going to pressure me to make a move. And my point to him was, look, that's why you're working with a firm like Trusted Visions is we're going to keep the wolves, so to speak, being the corporate recruiters and the broker dealers away from you, but let's just have a conversation and get a package together, and then we'll keep them away from you until you're ready. I relate this back to 3-4 years ago when there was a large network of broker dealers that was sold, and they were basically given, I don't remember if it was 30 or 45 days to decide whether they were going or leaving. And, when you have a Super OSJ, if you think you're going to be able to move all of your advisors, to David's point, some of these Super OSJs are 200 plus advisors in less than 30 days, and you haven't even started the due diligence process, that's going to be a tough feat. And so understand, audience, and viewers, and even those Super OSJs and enterprises, we're not convincing you to make a move. We're simply telling you, just as you advise your clients, and we've preached on this a lot, have a plan B in place for the unforeseen circumstances. Worst case, if nothing changes, you stay put, but at least you know where you would have went. So that's my advice there. Now, a couple things I'm going to talk about is as it relates to advantages of a Super OSJ and large enterprise and being part of it is, and Shaun, I know you and David talked a lot about this, is obviously when you're going direct to a broker dealer as an individual advisor, they're just going to look at your rolling gross or trailing 12 months production and your asset level. When you're part of a large enterprise, they look at you as a collective group in that size. So in most, if not all cases, you're going to qualify for much higher levels of payouts, but also pricing on the advisory side because they're looking at it collectively as a whole, which is a win-win for everybody because you're making more. Plus, to my next point, you have that added layer of support. When I think, David, you mentioned it, when you're with a large OSJ or enterprise, it's kind of that mom and pop shop where if you don't want to go direct to the broker dealer because you don't want to be on hold for 15, 20 minutes, go to their staff. To Shaun's point, I think it's important to really look at that infrastructure and what infrastructure they have, because some of those large OSJs, are going to give you a very high payouts and pricing, but they don't necessarily have the infrastructure in place that some of the others do. So it's really what's important to you. I think the last portion of importance to advisors is, should you need an exception? Whether it's product related, whether it's, hey, I want to use this IMO, whatever it may be. Let's be honest, and Shaun, I think you nailed this a few weeks ago on a podcast. Once you're on board and direct with a broker dealer, if you're an individual advisor, and this is no disrespect to a $100,000, $200,000 advisor, if you think they're going to make an exception for you, I can almost assure you throughout my career, it's not going to happen. But being part of that larger enterprise or OSJ, they certainly have, not that they're more important, but they certainly have a larger voice and much more pull, because the last thing that broker dealer wants to do is see, a lot of these large enterprises, Super OSJs, are 10 plus million in GDC all the way up to 150 million. And so they're going to make those people happy because they don't want them to leave. And then lastly, you'll likely have more access to executive leadership within whatever broker dealer being part of one of those large enterprises. So Shaun, David, did I miss anything there?
No, sounds good.
It's perfect.
Perfect. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking part in this podcast. Should you have any questions, should you want to formulate a plan B, or just talk through what does a plan B look like, don't hesitate to email us at info@trustedvisions.com. Feel free to comment on our LinkedIn page or follow us on our LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook page at Trusted Visions Placement and Consulting. Audience, thank you so much for taking part and viewing our podcast. We hope that this information is informative to you and useful. I hope everybody has a great week. Team, as always, I appreciate you, and we'll be back next week.